Hello, and welcome to this second video on the Dual Harmonic Oscillator from AtoVproject. Let's check out what's to come. This video is sponsored by AtoVproject. Now, back when I filmed the demo for the Dual Harmonic Oscillator, which is linked below and you should definitely go watch that video before this one, I filmed so much stuff that I couldn't fit it all in one video. So here's a second video with extra patches, extra sounds, extra musical examples. So without further ado, let's dive in. So here we're turning one LFO into this whole expressive dynamic moving patch by multiplying our modulation again through that mod bus to different harmonics and FM settings. Kind of separate to the main patch, but as one of the nice layers here, I have the two saw waves out of the expander coming into blades here. The LFO that modulates the mod is being multiplied and it's modulating both sides of the filter in opposing ways to create this tilting of cutoff frequencies. That's feeding a reverb. Now the main outputs, two triangle waves, single harmonics, are coming in stereo here in the mix, hard left and right. They have slightly different but nearly the same volt-proctive sequences to create some little harmonic moments between them. And I want to use this single modulator to bring in the harmonics in the patch. So hitting mod, turning up harmonic 2. A single LFO is now shifting through this algorithmic noise map and creating these nice tilts and moves of the harmonics in stereo as the two oscillators are panned hard left and right here. I then wanted to bring in some FM modulation, oscillator 2 normals to 1 and 2 back to 1. So let's turn up a little bit of mod on both of them. So that through zero modulation now is dancing around with that modulation as well. And for some further harmonic sculpting, and this is something we'll look at later in the video as well, I'm patching harmonic outputs to modulate other harmonic inputs. Saw wave layer back in, again 2 saws into the filter, same LFO that's coming into mod, modulating the filter cutoffs, bit of reverb. Let's just implement some simple inbuilt LFO modulation this time to enhance this patch. There's some drums external to the module. And here's the output of the Dual Harmonic Oscillator from the fold out. Straight out, nothing else going on. I have a 16th note envelope to harmonic 1 on oscillator 1. A little bit of envelope modulation to the folding. And it's otherwise a pretty static sound. Now I want to play with the FM, because it sounds good, and also fading in the second harmonic there. So we're going to do this with LFOs. Again, holding mod here. Let's hold the button down, move the encoder, on the FM and harmonic 2, and we can see these flash as LFOs. We know that these are now LFO modulators for these destinations. And where we're in that mod mode, not holding, just LED active, let's turn up an amount with modulation for both of them. Coming out of mod mode, we can see the activity of both of them here. Again, we're using this mod to tune and fade through different rates for these LFOs. A little bit of that harmonic pushing and pulling, slower fade of FM. It's really animated and brought this to life. So here we'll explore a deep, rich, evolving drone sound that's all manually controlled with the through 0 FM. You're listening to the 4 harmonics patched directly out into my mixer so that I can pan some of those harmonics, and if you've got headphones on, you'll certainly hear these octaves kind of stagger out in the stereo image a little bit. The main outs are just to give us this Lissajous curve here on data for some eye candy. We're going to through 0 FM from the normalised second oscillator here. Play with the harmonics, which are then going to come through to modulate the FM. If you get something a little too chaotic that's not that stable, quote, musical, you're only ever a sync away from sorting that out. So VCO2, which is our FM modulator, into hard sync the first one. Rock solid, stable FM tones. So here we're looking at AM synthesis from non-triangle sources, and in this case we're going to use the expander with some saw waves. We're currently listening to the top oscillator, single harmonic, green trace here and purple cables, that triangle wave, and we'll use the saw wave from the same oscillator, so it's at the same rate, exactly locked into that top oscillator, to modulate harmonic 1. And it morphs into this really stable, almost envelope shape. Almost looks like an ADSR. Now I'm going to use VCO2 and the saw wave on the expander for VCO2. This is a couple of octaves higher, slight little bit of detune, so there's a tiny bit of movement in the sound. That's going to modulate the level of harmonic 2. And we get an almost PWM-like sound because it's moving, it's not totally locked in. I'm not using any sync to kind of really lock the oscillators in. I patch in some AtoVproject here to control both oscillators, and this gets even more interesting when we come out of the fold output. Typically folding complex waves gets really messy. This is really nicely dialed in to deal with all this harmonic content. If we lose our sequencing, back up the octave. So here we're looking at AM synthesis still, amplitude modulation and synthesizing waveforms with amplitude modulation. But here I'm doing so in a kind of cross-feeding back manner. Now I have some drums, separate to what's going on here. And these are the outputs, hard left and right in 2 filters that are panned hard left and right on my mixer. there's envelope and random modulation of the filtering. We'll lose that and listen to these raw. Now as I start to add some modulation, let's first just blend in some harmonics. We won't go too high here, but there they are, just a little bit of the second, third and fourth octaves there. And you can see I've used coloured cables here to say that the output of the top oscillator harmonic 3 modulates harmonic 4 on the bottom one, 2 on the top one modulates 2 on the bottom one, fourth harmonic on the bottom modulates the top second harmonic, and so on. So we've got this kind of dense network of cross modulation. So as I modulate one and then modulate the other side, I'm starting to build this really rich, and that little bit of beating is just a fine tune not being set perfectly. I don't want them hard locked in sync, I like this movement. Let's stick with that and add our pitch back in. That through the filtering. Drums back in. Bit of extra grit with FM. So here we'll look at adding a symmetry control to the folder. And what a symmetry control does regarding folding is mixing a DC offset positive or negative value to asymmetrically push the peaks of your input waveform into more or less folding on its positive or negative sides. Here's the end result, this lovely kind of PWM, almost unison style sound. So adding in this LFO, which is VCO2, blending with the triangle wave from VCO1. We get this lovely, as I said, PWM unison style effect. Slowing the LFO down. Going down an octave on VCO1. Really lovely deep sound. Add a pitch sequence to VCO1. Then routing this output, instead of being direct to my mixer, through a low pass gate. Here we've got this rave-y kind of electro house lead line. And this is hard sync. I'm using hard sync on square waves as my outputs here to create this rave-y lead line. And here's the lead line with no effects. Taking the square output here out into an external VCA in my mixer, and that's all that's happening in the signal path that you're currently listening to. Have PWM of this square or pulse. These are just used to create a Lissajous curve here, there's nothing happening with the triangles and harmonics. And I have one volt per octave line, which is just an envelope, creating this wonky pitch thing. And then I have another sequence, there's my actual main pitch sequence, here it is to both oscillators. Oscillator 2 is hard syncing oscillator 1, so with that in oscillator 2, and then pitch enveloping oscillator 1 that we're listening to. There's then some reverb in a stereo filter. This has all been sidechained, it's all ducking, including the lead as well against the drums. So here's a patch with masses of modulation, one that I've been having lots of fun with. Got stepped random here on this data, green cables to the 4 harmonics on the top section. The bottom section is 4 LFOs. I have various outputs here giving me different bits of patching and layering going on, and some backing drums, which are coming from outside of the system. Now the first and kind of main patch is the main output here. And you can hear all this modulation of the harmonics and the folding and blend of the two oscillators. The individual oscillator outs are just for some eye candy there on data, they're not being used. And then 3 different harmonics are used to create kind of low pass gate struck percussion sounds. Harmonic 2 from the lower voice, just playing all the notes on my clock. And then harmonic 2 from the top oscillator and harmonic 3 from the bottom, going into a filter here being used like a low pass gate, just opening those filters. We have cross FM, that cleans up really nicely. We've got the FM, but I like a bit of that cross mod. Gives those cleaner harmonic outs a bit of grit to go with the folded grit if you like. And the final output is the 2 saw waves from the expander, so both oscillators hard panned into the left and right inputs of a VCA, and then envelope making them swell. So as I build these layers, my regular low pass gate, additional triangle harmonic outs in stereo, main output, additional fading saw waves in stereo from the expander, drums back in, if you've got this far in the video, go drop a hard sync in the comments. Hit like and subscribe, that all helps the channel. Go to patreon.com/DivKid to support the work that I do, and I'll see you next time. Bye!